the outcomes are coming out, like these terrorist attacks, particularly the one in Cybertruck.
The economy and Trump coming back.
If you look at all the top companies in America, they are all tech companies, and how they have added to the wealth creation, that's phenomenal.
Average American worker cannot even afford a vacation going to Florida.
That Trump has achieved, and of course it's unprecedented.
I think it's nonsense.
Suits with either Russia or America or for any country for that matter.
Hello and very warm welcome to this very cold afternoon from our London studios. I'm Sohail Qureshi with my program Sharp Edge, and I'm bringing two very interesting guests from the other two different poles of the world. One, Mr. Aftab Sial, who is a journalist and commentator and chief editor of the Houston Times. He has flown in from Texas, United States of America. And my other guest is Vimal Joshi, who is a business writer, commentator, and he is working for a top media house in India. And he's quite well known for his article on business economy. So we start with Mr. Aftab Sial. So very warm welcome, Aftab. Thank you very much for coming here.
Thank you so much for having me on your show.
You're welcome. So how is London treating you? Are you a bit startled with the wave of cold that we have here?
Actually, I'm enjoying it. I'm from Texas and we get cold often, but not that much. And it's different here because Houston is a coastal area. So we have a lot of humidity and stuff. But I actually enjoying the...
And you're keeping yourself warm and really cozy in these days.
I'm trying to.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you again. And my other guest is Vimal Joshi. Vimal, thank you very much for coming. I know you studied here at Birkbeck College. You're doing a journalism some time ago, and then you are here again. So how are you finding London now?
London is good. It's cold. I mean, relatively speaking, back home in India, it's not as cold. So that is one thing which I find hard to endure. But apart from that, it's good. It's a lovely place.
Great. So a lot has happened, Aftab, since you left the United States to come here in the last 2-3 weeks, and especially the two terrorist attacks, the economy, and Trump coming back. So there's a lot of things that we want to ask you, and our audience would love to hear your thoughts. But basically, we'll focus on the global economy challenges and the benefits it has or has not provided to the populace in the world. And then we'll compare it whether the emerging economy, Indian emerging economy, the fifth largest economy in the world, GDP-wise, whether it is following the trends of United States. So we'll start from you. So how are things going to be with Trump coming in?
We were hopeful that Trump will make some changes and bring America out of this economic crisis, which is not seen up front, but you can see the symptoms and the outcomes are coming out, like these terrorist attacks, particularly the one in Cybertruck, Matthew Livesenberg, or I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. The last few days, his manifesto came out, or his writings on the social media, where he is explaining why he is fixing to do this kind of horrific act. And it is directly related with the economy. And he's talking about the wealth gap, how the American working class has lost their glory and their standard of living. It is very hard for everyday people to survive in this high inflation environment. Even the government is saying that the inflation is under 3%, but these are very tricky numbers. I mean, they exclude the rental cost, they exclude the energy cost, and they don't talk about how much average worker is making nowadays. And most of the jobs are going overseas. They have outsourced, especially the technological jobs, tremendously in the last 25 years.
Do you think it's that simple that this cyber truck attack is directly related to a disgruntled American who is upset with the sagging economy or stagnant economy and the price hike and inflation? Do you think it's that simple?
It is. It's simple as it can be, or it can be complex. It's depending on what angle you are looking at the things. I will give you example, and maybe the lot of people does not know about that because mainstream media does not talk about these things. If we'll go back into the glorious days of American working class, middle class, where that middle class came from, from 1940s up to 1980s. And I will ask producer to put some data on the screen so your viewers can see what I'm talking about. The marginal tax rate on high income earner started from 65% and it hit 95%. It peaked out.
Well, that's astonishing.
Yeah, and
the tax that people pay, or is it like a slabs tax, income slabs, or just
it was done that at that time when it was introduced, they put a cap on the income up. Anything you make above $25,000 at that time, if we adjust to the inflation number, it will be about $1.5 million in nowadays. So anything you were making above that number, 95% at the peak and 65% around the bottom line, that income tax was going to United States government. And with that money, they were building a massive industrial complex, massive military industrial complex, and they put highway system, they put dam, and they put minimum wage at that time, and they started Social Security at that time. And so these things were very helpful for a middle class working people to compensate them. So in a simple way, we will call redistribution of wealth from top earner to the...
In 1980s, the probably considered 70s or 80s actually considered to be the best decades for the American economy in the modern history, coming out of the World War II and then the recession of 1929 onwards. And that must have elevated the income gain of the middle and the lower middle class. So that's why we see a huge middle class in America.
Right.
So what went wrong then?
What happened is from 1970s and onward, the average worker income stayed at the same level because it does not kept up with the inflation. If we look at, I was listening to very honorable Professor Richard Wolff. He's a well-known economist, and he was mentioning that if you compare numbers to number, that American average worker is making less money today compared to 1970 when you adjust for the inflation. So like today's economy, one person with one income cannot survive.
I think we, being at your transatlantic neighbors, I think we can look at it because in 1780s, America was a beacon of hope for everybody. And people will go to America as if the money grows on the trees, and probably it did at that time.
Right.
But now the recent reports, and especially the video footage that we see, so much of homelessness, joblessness, and the anger and anguish of the people is unheard of. I will bring Vimal in this discussion because Vimal is from India, and as we know, India has emerged hugely in the last 3 or so decades, becoming the world's fifth largest economy. So Vimal, how, from your point of view, this kind of a capitalistic approach that different economies have adapted, how do you think is going to benefit? I would like you to comment on Aftab's narrative about U.S. economy and then probably relate to the Indian economy.
I think U.S. economy's growth and India's economy's growth, they are somewhat, to some extent, similar because it's all driven by technology. I mean, if you look at all the top companies in America, they are all tech companies, and how they have added to the wealth creation, that's phenomenal. I mean, not only it adds to the taxes, but it also leads to the employment generation. I mean, the similar strategy, unknowingly or unwittingly, has been followed by the Indian entrepreneurs. Also, because of the initiatives taken by the government in the states and the center. So they have set up huge IT companies. I mean, a lot of employers came, they set up the tech companies. That led to the, service-oriented industry. Unlike if we talk about our Asian neighbor China, wherein it's all manufacturing driven. So in India, manufacturing is still quite muted. But when it comes to the service sector, in primarily the tech sector, so that is what dominates, and that is what has added to the economic growth.
Do you think? Do you have any comment on the $32 trillion debt, internal and external, of United States of America has something to do on where people are feeling right now? Although these things cannot be seen, but probably that's why the stagnation of economy and the MAGA movement of Trump.
I mean, it has to be seen through an interplay of various factors. I mean, when we talk about the economic progress, I mean, the entrepreneurs and the workforce, they collectively contribute towards how the economy progresses. But the country has internal as well as external challenges, because of which sometimes it indulges in wars. They have to take a lot of bold decisions, because of which sometimes, their income falls short of their expenses. So as a result of which, America, for example, had to take huge amounts of loans. I mean, it is supposedly the big brother of the world. So it indulges, for good or bad, we can comment on it later, but it indulges in the affairs of various parts of the world, such as Afghanistan, Iraq. So as a result of which, when you look at the income and expenditure statement of any country, it works the way it works in the case of the households. If your expenses are more than the income, obviously you have to meet the deficit by taking loans.
Yeah. There's a Perpetual War for Perpetual Peace, a very good book by Gore Vidal, and it explains that since 1890s onward, America had been into some kind of perpetual war, and there's hardly a time when America was not in war with anybody else. But then the wars are expensive, unless that you take the loot and exploits and to benefit yourself. And that's how the empires actually began becoming rich. So do you think that time is over? So the American machine is spending more on the wars than gaining back?
Okay, very interesting point you mentioned. I mean, it's a perpetual war which has been going on for decades. But sadly, the time I wish were over, but it has not. I mean, despite United Nations, being in existence for several decades now. It was set up in 1945, and now we are in 2025. I mean, it is not over. I mean, Russia-Ukraine war is still on. There is a conflict in Israel and various parts of the world. I mean, Afghanistan, Taliban is back. So war, unfortunately, is not over, despite the best of the efforts of...
Let me focus on the Indian economy, and then we'll go back to Aftab for his views. India undoubtedly has gained huge appraise from the world for really breathing on China, basically, in terms of its rise in economy. Do you think it has percolated to the lowest rungs of society? Because I can see, I've been reading the data, the poverty is still huge in India.
I mean, yes and no. I'll answer it with a certain nuance to it. When you say country has progressed, yes, undoubtedly it has. If you look at the numbers, it is now, to my mind, the fifth largest economy in the world. So collectively, it has progressed. and it has also led to a rising and growing and widening middle class. So the people who were extremely poor or who could not afford the basic luxuries of the technological era which was coming up. So certain people have joined the bandwagon and they have become part of the middle class. So that thing has taken place since 1991. So 1991 was an epical year for India because that is when the liberalization happened, when the economy was open to the rest of the world.
BJP government at that time, or was it?
It was Congress government.
I see. Okay.
So liberalization was rolled out by the then finance minister Manmohan Singh, who later on became the prime minister of India. So he was the leading economist.
Manmohan Singh was born in Pakistan. You know that in Czech.
Yes.
A very learned.
It was, yeah.
Yes.
So it was quite interesting when General Pervez Musharraf, he visited India. So Pervez Musharraf made a remark that I am the president of Pakistan but was born in India, and you are the prime minister of India but you were born in Pakistan.
Right.
So coming back to what you asked me, so 1991 the liberalization happened, economy opened up, several people joined the middle class. So that led to a lot of economic progress for the country as well as for millions of people. But to answer your question, whether it has managed to remove poverty of everybody in the country, certainly not. The country is not completely devoid of poverty as it applies to any country in the world. So there are millions of people who still need support and aid of the government and philanthropists. And there are still millions of people who are battling with the various economic hardships.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Vimal, for quite a detailed answer, really covering the geopolitics. So I would bring Aftab into this discussion about India and how India is or probably trying to emulate America. Aftab, you've been in the United States for a very long time, well over 3 decades, and you have seen probably the glorious time. And I know that before this, we were discussing that how the ordinary American people are feeling a little bit down in the last quite some time. Do you think India should follow America and probably go the same path eventually, or do you think this has to be a distribution of wealth more equable and more equal?
I think if they want a stable economy for long term, they have to look at the flaws in United States capitalism, which evolved from 1980s onward. And it was like India, I agree with our guest from India, that India is flourishing right now because they started, from 1991 onward, they started from a very lower start level, and where India was a third world country and poverty was, it was the main ramping and everything. So when you start from bottom, there is only way is to go up. So India is rising, but eventually it will peak out. And during this rise, if the wealth is not redistributed accordingly to the society in form of benefit like freer education, more opportunity to get skilled working, qualities, and then you have a good healthcare system where people are feel part of that economy, which United States abandoned their working class, in my opinion, and they start outsourcing the job, deindustrializing their industry, and they reach their peak of their glory around, you can say, in 1980s. And after that, it's a gradual downward, what I will call it, downward, they're going down in downhill, when it comes to working class. But the top 1% or top 10%, they benefited a lot. And I will give this example right now as we stand. Top 5 people, the richest people in United States, they have more wealth compared to 50% of the population combined. But when we look at the global, top 10% of the global wealth is concentrated in the top 10%. And the half of the population of the world is living, their wealth and those top 10% is equal. So that
The distribution of the wealth in the different strata of society eventually benefiting the people at the lowest rung. That's
Right.
what we're talking about.
right. And I give example for our viewers that if they look at the Scandinavian model, that is also a capitalist model where you have higher taxes and more benefits for everybody. And then you see more happier people. They are less materialistic and they are more humane. I mean, it shows up in their general population behavior. Versus when you look at the United States, the anger is rising. I mean, if we don't pay attention to that, that will be, just closing your eyes and not doing anything.
We talked about earlier the infrastructure and all that. America invested heavily in the hardcore infrastructure, which are the roads, bridges, but more importantly on the educational and academic institutions. The focus on education and science and technology was humongous. And then they are reaping. And then, of course, that followed the technology. And then, in my opinion, the biggest weapon they have is H-1B visa that was able to attract the world best brain and the human resource, and I'll ask this question to both of you. And Vimal, in India, we don't see that huge investment on that basic infrastructure. I know recently that they extended the rail network, they extended the roads and all that, but the magnitude on the scale that was required because you need to have a launching pad to be launched, that is lacking. So first, let me ask Vimal, and then I'll ask Aftab to answer that.
Right. So infrastructure is sort of a building block for any economy to progress. No economy can progress without a good infrastructure in place. But I do not think there is not enough investment in infrastructure in India, because in last I think 10 to 15 years they are the one of the key focuses of the government is to invest in the infrastructure, whether it comes to setting up new airports, or even to widen the highways, or to set up new highways.
Metropolis, the cities are making the cities bigger and
So this is what has been happening, which has led to more and more multinational companies setting their bases in India. So that has happened. It may be, relatively speaking, it may not be, in line, proportionately similar to what has been done in China, for example. They have done it at a very, very aggressive scale. I mean, I was reading one biography by Barack Obama, the first part of his two-part biography, so in which he mentions that he visited China, and it was like, it was like development on drugs. Like, it was done at such a massive scale and such aggressive level that they are doing it at that aggressive level. So relatively speaking, you may argue that probably it has not happened at that level. But if you look at the data, I mean, the progress which has been driven because of the investment in the infrastructure, that has been massive. And that has repeatedly, in a budget after budget, the government emphasizes that infrastructure is one of their key focuses.
Yeah, certainly. Of course, China has done a giant or absolutely massive leaps in infrastructure. And it's not only in China. The Road and Belt and Road Initiative
Yes.
by the Premier King Xi is absolutely amazing.
That's right.
And they have spent hundreds of $1 billion in Africa and in many other places. And I suppose this is going to help alleviate poverty, no matter whatever the capitalistic or political plans these countries or nations may have, say China vis-a-vis Africa, but eventually it will help people. So after listening to Vimal, do you see another surge of investment in the infrastructure in America, or it is more like a stagnant, and there's a majority of investments is going to military industrial complex rather than on a human resource and the wider infrastructure?
See, they have ballooned their debt tremendously in last 15 years. I mean, if you look at our 25-year, precisely, when Bill Clinton left the office, United States debt was $5.6 trillion. In last 25 years, and that you have to mind that, keep it in consideration, $5.7 trillion was accumulated from the birth of United States.
So it's over 60, almost 200.
200 years, United States debt was $5.6 trillion. From 2000 till now, it has reached $35 trillion. So in last quarter of century, they have ballooned their debt so much that now it has become harder and harder for them to put the money in infrastructure, redistribute some wealth, or bring down their debt levels. I mean, a lot of economists, they are alarming United States government that they have reached the red line and it is unsustainable. And I will refer to Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell. He mentioned this off and on in his recent speeches and letters and discussions that it is unsustainable. If United States...
and I think there's another angle to it, that quite a large portion of this debt is to China. This is very interesting. So the external debts. So in other words, America owes a lot of money to China and to the Arab states,
right?
Because they have bought these bonds, that is a treasury bonds that they and the issue would be that if there is a kind of some kind of economic war going on between America and China, and if it carries on, what will happen to that? And that will definitely going to destabilize American economy.
Oh, definitely. I mean, if you look at that, like when in 200 years, their debt was only 5.6 trillion. And out of that debt, they built highways, they built dams, they built a great middle class.
They built America, actually.
Actually, yes, you are right. And with last 25 years, they have nothing to show where that money went. And it just went to top 1%. I mean, it's I'm not making it up. It's you can look at the data, which is public, that how much oligarchs they have produced during this last 25 years. And this is where the American working class is angry at their establishment. I mean, you look at the rise of populism. Like in 2016, they were saying, okay, it's a one-time shot that Donald Trump won. Okay. Now, he won again with a massive victory. And his message was to make America great again. And I will say, what is the definition of great again? The great again is to build a great middle class who participate. Average American worker cannot even afford a vacation going to Florida. You talk about going overseas. They can't even go to their own country to visit because they cannot afford it.
I think it's a very concerning moment in American history, because this undoubtedly will affect the world economy. And Vimal, would you agree that this path that America or American capitalistic society or the elite have taken, yes, wealth creation is a very noble cause, because only through wealth creation, through the entrepreneur and businessmen and traders, you can create X amount of wealth. But then the issue is not that. The issue is that the taxation and how the institution ensure that a shared portion of that goes to the governmental exchequer and treasury, and then it is accordingly, it is invested on, again, human development and infrastructure. Do you see that kind of campaign going on in a very visceral level in India?
In India?
Yeah. So in other words, the wealth creation that India is embarked upon, do you think that there is a visceral notion and a visceral drive to invest in the infrastructure and expand that middle class to the pace which is required now?
I mean, if we talk about what is happening right now, obviously there is always a scope to improvement. And the model that they have been working on, it seems to be working right as of now. But as our guest has pointed out, that in America, things are very different vis-a-vis how they were several years ago. So how, I mean, things will go on for India, let's say after 20 years, we will know only when that time comes. But as of now, things may be working right, so they are moving on to that path. And how it will turn out to be for the people who are at the bottom of the pyramid, that again, as the time progresses, we will know about it. But as of now, things seem to be working, and the middle class is expanding. As any economy that undergoes this transformation, so the transformation happens when the middle class expands. So later on, problems start occurring. So how the economy shapes up at that time, I mean, you will need only for that time to come.
Right. I just have the one penultimate question to each of you, actually. So, Aftab, do you think with this mega movement triumph that Trump has achieved, and of course it's unprecedented, and it appears that the deep state is resisting his smooth coming over into the power, do you think Trump, with his policy that he announced, are more realistic and futuristic, and Trump and his team will be able to reverse the tide of, so to say, subtle decline of the United States imperialism?
I mean, one can have a wishful thinking, but if there is no solid plan, economic plan, then I don't think that they will be able to achieve anything bigger, because he's talking about lowering the tax rather than increasing the tax. So he's going against the wall. Like I mentioned earlier, American Glory came in with the proper redistribution of wealth among the middle class and everyday workers. Now that course has changed. So mathematically, it cannot happen. He can have nice speeches and everything. I am like this. His team, I am really kind of disappointed that he does not have an economist with him who is guiding him and giving him right reason to apply those policies. What is redistribution of wealth among people? Because the oligarchs are sucking the system out. Like you mentioned H-1B visa. And it came to my knowledge a few days ago that the Einstein type of visa, like they are bragging about, we are bringing the talent from the outside, okay? For the exclusive talented people, like Einstein and Steve Jobs or that type of caliber people, they have a different class of visa. It's called O1, and nobody hear about that. H-1B visa is for accountant from the lower wage group. Like I was reading...
Middle or lower, exactly.
Exactly. And they're pretending like that H-1B visa, we are bringing the glory to America, technological achievement, which is, I think it's nonsense. And totally they are misguiding the people. Because H-1B visa is not what people are thinking or they're propagating. Yeah, they can get the highest talent with O1 visas.
Okay, thank you. So, Vimal, Indian economy is shining, is becoming incredible, India, and with it, its power, and especially becoming a part of BRICS, which is very, very important. And it appears that India is actually looking both ways. One is BRICS, which is China and Russia primarily. And on the other hand, India is also a darling of America and the West. Do you think that this, and then on the third part is the population. We still see 200 or 300 million people who are living below the poverty line. So how do you see that this particular government or this BJP government or coalition is going to drive it to benefit of the people?
I mean, it's very hard to speak on behalf of the government. However, I mean, see, the dynamics of geopolitics have changed quite a lot in past, let's say, 2-3 decades. I mean, India as a country has never been on, part of one group, so to speak. So it has its own autonomous way of thinking, wherein it, sides with, one country or the group of the countries based on the, medium term and long term benefit for the country. So typically, India, because of its, foreign policy, it has never aligned with one country, so to speak, forever. I mean, it might go against the perception of a lot of people. So for the economic interest of the country and for also the long-term progress of the country, sometimes it, aligns with the policy which suits
one for or another.
Yeah.
Okay.
It suits with either Russia or America or for any country for that matter. Because it's a democratically elected government which takes its decisions based on what is priority at that point of time.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you very much, both of you. It has been very enlightening to hear from you on how the global economy and
One thing which I am very curious to know from our guest about, how America has re-elected Donald Trump, and it is primarily driven by, the nudging of Elon Musk, which talks about bringing, major reform, the overhaul of the economy and all that. And it is very rightly he pointed out about the debt, huge debt in America. And Elon Musk and his entire team, they are bringing this new DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency, which is supposedly going to reform the country and its economy. So while being out of America, it seems there's a lot of optimism and hope in how the America is going to progress in times to come. So what does he have to say? I mean, our ethnic Indian Vivek Ramaswamy is also part of the DOGE team.
Yeah.
So
now the Apple's chief executive is taken over by one Indian. Okay, let me ask Aftab, right?
Well, I mean, that will be excellent, the Department of Government Efficiency, because there is a lot of waste, of course, going on. But I will go back to my main point, and I want to mention that in America, there is so much gap between let's say Apple, for example, how much the CEO of Apple is making and how much the lowest worker in Apple is making. That gap has widened so much. If you look at the European, they put cap that how much a CEO can make. And like, let's say this worker make $2,000 a month. And CEO cannot make $2 million a month. This is what is happening in America, that most of the wealth creation is going upward versus downward, or it stays in the middle. And last 10 or 15 years, the companies, bigger companies, they have adopted this policy of buying back their own shares. So whatever money the wealth they generate, they go to the turnaround and they start buying their own stocks. This is why you have so many companies, they have reached over $1 trillion in market values. But that $1 trillion value has no value at all for a working class.
So you're basically saying that the pilferage and the efficiency and the effectiveness of the strategies, and that's a good thing that Trump and aided by Elon Musk are bringing. So that's a good thing. Okay, we'll leave it there then. So thank you very much. So dear viewers, it's been wonderful to have two very able commentators on politics and to geopolitical spheres as well to an extent, and to have their views from the opposing side of the world. And I'm glad to hear that both of these nations are going up in some shape of optimism or realism in case of India going to the fifth largest economy, and with America with Trump coming back with a promise not to engage in any war, a kind of a peace-loving person with all his own colors of his personality, so to say. And with that, I say thank you very much for joining us, and to my
Thank you
guests.
so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And goodbye from London.